My mother-in-law stood at the head of the dining room table and smiled like she was hosting a game show. Around her sat 14 relatives, including my husband, our 7-year-old son, and every member of the family who had spent years pretending to tolerate me. Then she raised a piece of paper and asked a question that changed everything. Should Emily be banned from future family events? One by one, hands went up. My son looked around in confusion before tears filled his eyes. Mom, why are they doing this? I hugged him and stayed silent, because I already knew something they didn't. And exactly 7 days later, they would wish they had never taken that vote. The smell of grilled burgers drifted across Diane's backyard as relatives filled folding chairs beneath strings of patio lights. To anyone passing by, it looked like a perfect family gathering. Laughter, music, kids running through the grass. But I knew better. For 8 years, every family event had felt like walking into a room where I was tolerated, not welcomed. I stood beside my husband Ryan near the picnic table while our 7-year-old son, Noah, chased bubbles with his cousins. Try to relax, Ryan whispered. I forced a smile. Across the yard, Diane watched me the way a judge watches someone already found guilty. Dinner ended, and people settled into their seats. That was when Diane stood and tapped a glass with a spoon. Before dessert, she announced, smiling, I think we need to discuss something important. The conversation stopped. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Diane folded her hands dramatically. For years, this family has dealt with unnecessary tension. Several relatives glanced toward me. My pulse quickened. I think we should be honest, Diane continued. The common denominator has always been Emily. Silence. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me. Mom, he said quietly. She ignored him. Many of us feel gatherings have become stressful. So I have a simple question. Then she pulled out a sheet of paper. Should Emily be banned from future family events? For a moment, nobody moved. I actually thought they would laugh. Instead, Diane raised her own hand. Then Ryan's uncle, his sister, 2 cousins, an aunt. One by one, hands rose into the air. My chest tightened. I looked around the table in disbelief. 14 people, 12 hands. Noah stared at them, confused. Then his eyes filled with tears. Mom, he whispered, tugging my sleeve. Why are they doing this? The entire yard suddenly felt silent. I knelt beside him and pulled him into my arms. It's okay, I said softly. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. Diane smiled like she had won. What nobody knew was that my phone had vibrated moments earlier, and the message on that screen was about to change everything. If someone had asked me that afternoon why Diane hated me, I probably would have given the polite answer. Personality differences. That was easier than explaining 8 years of criticism disguised as concern. The truth was that Diane had disliked me from the moment Ryan introduced me to the family. Back then, Ryan and I had been dating for 6 months. I was a public school teacher. I loved my job, loved helping kids, and genuinely believed kindness solved most problems. Diane disagreed. During our first dinner, she spent 20 minutes talking about successful women in business before casually asking how much teachers earned. When I answered, she smiled and said, Well, at least Ryan won't be marrying for money. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. Things only got worse after Ryan and I married. If Noah caught a cold, Diane blamed my parenting. If Ryan looked tired, she blamed my cooking. If I missed a gathering because of work, I was selfish. If I attended, I was trying too hard. No matter what I did, it was wrong. The hardest part wasn't Diane. It was everyone else. Most relatives never joined her attacks, but they never stopped them either. They would sit quietly while she criticized me, then act friendly afterward, as though nothing had happened. For years, I convinced myself things would improve. I kept showing up. Birthday parties, Christmas dinners, summer barbecues, graduations. I attended every event because I wanted Noah to know his family. But children notice more than adults realize. By age 7, Noah had already started asking questions. Why does Grandma always sound mad at you? Why do people get quiet when you walk in? questions I never wanted him asking. Over the past year, Diane's behavior had become even stranger. The comments were sharper, the hostility more open. Sometimes I caught relatives exchanging nervous looks whenever she entered a room. It felt like something was happening beneath the surface, something nobody wanted to discuss. And after the vote, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Diane wasn't acting like someone who felt powerful. She was acting like someone desperate, and desperate people were usually hiding something. That night, after Noah finally fell asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the message that had arrived during Diane's little family vote. Most people would have expected something dramatic. It wasn't. Just 3 short sentences from an investigator. We found additional documentation. The records confirm a pattern. Call me tomorrow morning. I read the message at least 20 times. Ryan walked into the kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee. You still haven't told me what that text was about, he said. I hesitated. For months, I had kept an important part of my life completely separate from family matters. Now those worlds were beginning to collide. 3 years earlier, I had left teaching and gone to law school at night while working full-time. It had been exhausting, but eventually I became a compliance attorney specializing in financial investigations. Most of my work involved helping companies identify misconduct before it became a public disaster. It wasn't exciting. Usually it was spreadsheets, contracts, invoices, and endless reports. But about 8 months earlier, one case had caught my attention. A consulting client suspected financial irregularities inside a local family-owned business. Missing funds, unusual payments, vendor accounts that seemed to exist only on paper. At first, it was routine. Then I saw the company name. I almost dropped the file. The business belonged to Diane. Not directly. The ownership structure was complicated, spread across several relatives and holding companies. But Diane effectively controlled everything. The moment I realized that, I considered removing myself from the case. Professionally, it would have been easier. Personally, it felt necessary. Instead, strict safeguards were put in place, and another team handled the direct investigation. I only reviewed compliance findings. Or at least that was how it started. As months passed, more anomalies appeared. Questionable invoices, unexplained transfers, payments routed through unfamiliar accounts. Nothing conclusive on its own. But together they formed a troubling pattern. A pattern that now seemed impossible to ignore. Ryan sat across from me. What aren't you telling me? He asked quietly. I looked down at the phone, then back at him. The reason that message matters, I said carefully, is because the investigation involves your mother's company. The color drained from his face, and for the first time, I realized just how serious this was becoming. The house felt unusually quiet after the barbecue. Ryan had gone upstairs hours earlier, but neither of us had slept. I found Noah sitting on the living room floor, hugging his favorite stuffed dinosaur. The television was on, but he wasn't watching it. He was staring at nothing. My heart broke. Hey, buddy, I said softly, sitting beside him. He leaned against me immediately. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then came the question I had been dreading. Does Grandma hate you? The words hit harder than anything Diane had said. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders.
No, sweetheart.
Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. Then why did everybody raise their hands? I swallowed. Because I didn't have an answer that a 7-year-old deserved to hear. Noah wiped his eyes. I wanted to raise my hand down. Despite everything, I almost smiled. A hand down.
Yeah.
So they would know I pick you. That nearly shattered me. I pulled him closer. Thank you. A few minutes later, Ryan walked into the room. His face looked exhausted. Noah, buddy, why don't you get ready for bed? Noah nodded and slowly headed upstairs. The moment he disappeared, the silence between Ryan and me became heavy. Finally, Ryan spoke. What happened today was wrong. I looked at him. Today? He flinched. You know what I mean. For years, Ryan. He lowered his eyes. For years. Not one barbecue. Not one vote. Years. For the first time since we'd met, I stopped protecting everyone else's feelings. I told him everything. The comments. The insults. The times Diane had humiliated me when nobody was looking. The countless occasions relatives stayed silent. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked physically sick. I didn't realize it was that bad. Yes, I said quietly. It was. Then I opened a folder on my laptop. Screenshots, messages, notes, records I had kept for years. Not for revenge. For sanity. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. Ryan stared at page after page. The color drained from his face. By midnight, neither of us was speaking. Something fundamental had changed. And for the first time, I made a decision. No matter what happened next, I would never attend another family gathering. Not because I was giving up. Because I was finally done asking people to treat me with basic respect. The next morning, I barely touched my coffee before my phone rang. It was the investigator. I stepped onto the back patio before answering. Emily, we've completed the review, he said. The serious tone in his voice immediately tightened my stomach. What did you find? A lot. For nearly 30 minutes, he walked me through the results. Every new detail felt heavier than the last. Several vendor accounts appeared legitimate on paper, but had no real business activity behind them. Invoices had been approved for services that couldn't be verified. Payments were routed through multiple accounts before disappearing. Some transactions were small. Others were not. By the end of the call, one thing was clear. This wasn't a bookkeeping mistake. It was a pattern. And that pattern pointed directly toward people with authority inside the company. When the call ended, an encrypted file appeared in my inbox. I opened it slowly. The pages of financial records filled the screen. Bank transfers, vendor agreements, approval signatures, audit notes, cross-reference timelines. The evidence was organized with painful precision. Halfway through the report, I froze. There it was. Diane's signature. Then another. And another. Again and again. I leaned back in my chair. Part of me wanted the evidence to be wrong. Despite everything she had done, Diane was still my husband's mother. Still Noah's grandmother. Still someone tied to my life, whether I liked it or not. But facts didn't care about emotions. The documents spoke for themselves. Ryan came downstairs around noon. One look at my face told him something had happened. What is it? I turned the laptop toward him. For several minutes, he read silently. His expression changed with every page. Confusion, concern, disbelief, then shock. Are these real? He asked. Yes. He stared at the screen again. Mom signed all of this? According to the records. Ryan sank into a chair. Neither of us spoke. The weight of what we were looking at filled the room. Finally, he rubbed both hands across his face. This is way bigger than family drama. I nodded. Much bigger. Outside, the neighborhood looked perfectly normal. Cars passed. Dogs barked. Children rode bicycles down the street. Meanwhile, inside our kitchen, evidence sat on a laptop screen that had the potential to change everything. And for the first time, even Ryan seemed to understand how serious the situation truly was. 3 days passed after the vote. I didn't contact Diane. I didn't defend myself in the family group chat. I didn't explain anything. I simply disappeared from their world. Apparently, that was exactly what they wanted. At least, that's what they thought. Every few hours my phone buzzed with new messages from relatives. Most weren't directed at me. They were conversations happening in the family group chat that Ryan still belonged to. He showed me everything. Diane was acting like she had won some kind of election. Things are finally peaceful. Some people bring negativity everywhere they go. Family comes first. The comments weren't subtle. Everyone knew who she meant. A few relatives added laughing emojis. Others stayed silent. The same silence that had followed me for years. One afternoon, Ryan tossed his phone onto the kitchen counter. You need to see this. I looked down. The family was organizing another gathering for the following weekend. A pool party. Games for the kids. Barbecue. Family photos. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not even as a courtesy. It was as if I had never existed. What hurt most wasn't me. It was Noah. He wandered into the kitchen while I was reading the messages. Are we going to Grandma's this weekend? I exchanged a glance with Ryan. "No, buddy," I said gently. His shoulders dropped immediately. "Oh." That single word carried more disappointment than an entire speech. Later that evening, I heard him telling a friend on a video call that he probably wouldn't see his cousins for a while. My chest tightened.
Diane claimed the vote was about me.
Yet somehow Noah was paying the price. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on work. The investigation continued moving forward. Attorneys reviewed documents. Auditors verified records. Reports were finalized. Official notices were being prepared. Every day brought another update. Every day brought another step closer to consequences. And still I said nothing. No warnings. No threats. No dramatic confrontations. Just silence. The family mistook that silence for defeat. They believed I had accepted my place. They believed I was embarrassed. They believed I had been pushed out for good. What they didn't know was that events already far beyond my control were moving forward. Important people were reviewing evidence. Important decisions were being made. And while Diane celebrated her victory, an invisible countdown had already begun. She simply didn't know the clock was ticking. By Friday morning, the investigation had reached a point where everything became official. Up until then, most of the work had happened quietly behind the scenes. Auditors reviewed records. Attorneys verified findings. Compliance officers checked every document twice. Now the process was moving into a new phase. The phase nobody could stop. I sat in my office staring at a draft notice displayed on my monitor. The language was formal and precise. No emotions. No accusations. Just facts. Questions regarding financial transactions. Requests for documentation. Deadlines requiring responses. Procedures that had to be followed. The law didn't care about family politics. It cared about evidence. My supervisor stepped into my office and closed the door. "You okay?" he asked. I knew what he really meant. Everyone involved in the case understood my connection to Diane. "I'll be fine," I said. "You've handled this professionally." I nodded but didn't answer. Professionalism was easier than honesty. The truth was that I felt exhausted. Not because of the investigation. Because of everything surrounding it. The vote. Noah's tears. Ryan's guilt. Years of humiliation. Part of me wished none of it had ever happened. Another part knew the outcome would have been exactly the same. The evidence existed whether I wanted it to or not. By noon, the final documents were approved. A certified legal notice was prepared for delivery. Additional agencies would receive copies. The process had officially begun. I watched the status update appear on my screen. Scheduled for delivery, Tuesday, 11:14 a.m. A strange feeling settled over me. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Relief. For months, uncertainty had hung over everything. Now, there was a timeline. A point where questions would finally require answers. That evening, Ryan found me sitting on the back porch. "Any updates?" he asked. I hesitated before speaking. The notice was finalized today. His expression immediately tightened. "When will she get it?" "Tuesday." Neither of us said anything for several seconds. The setting sun painted long shadows across the yard. Finally, Ryan exhaled slowly. "Do you think she has any idea?" I looked toward the horizon.
No.
And that was the truth. At that very moment, Diane was probably planning another family gathering, probably convinced she had won, completely unaware that a certified envelope was already on its way. And that envelope had the power to change everything. Tuesday arrived exactly the way most life-changing days do. Quietly. No thunderstorms. No dramatic warnings. Just an ordinary morning. By noon, Diane was hosting another family gathering at her house. The pool party from the group chat. Children splashed in the water. Music played through outdoor speakers. Relatives filled lawn chairs around the patio. From everything Ryan heard, Diane looked happier than she had in months. Apparently, removing me from family events had solved all her problems. At 11:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. A delivery confirmation. Certified notice delivered. Signature obtained. I stared at the screen for several seconds. The countdown was over. An hour later, Ryan's phone started ringing.
Once. Twice.
then repeatedly. He looked at the caller ID. His mother. Neither of us answered. The calls kept coming. By early afternoon, text messages began appearing. First from Diane, then from his aunt, then from two cousins. The tone was identical. Urgent.
Confused. Panicked.
Something had happened. Around 3 p.m., Ryan finally listened to a voicemail. His mother's voice sounded completely different from the confident woman who had organized the vote. "Ryan, call me immediately." A pause. Then another. "This is serious." By evening, details started reaching us through various relatives. The certified envelope had arrived during lunch. At first, Diane had opened it casually. No concern. No hesitation. Everyone assumed it was routine business correspondence. Then she started reading. Witnesses described the exact moment her expression changed. Her smile disappeared. The color drained from her face. She stopped speaking. Several pages slid from her hands onto the table. Relatives immediately noticed. "What is it? What's wrong? Is everything okay?" According to Ryan's cousin, Diane couldn't answer. She simply kept turning pages. Reading. Rereading.
Staring.
The documents contained formal findings, requests for financial records, questions regarding company transactions, deadlines requiring responses, notifications that additional reviews were underway. Nothing emotional, nothing personal, just facts. Cold professional facts. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The pool party stopped feeling like a celebration. Conversations became whispers. Children were sent outside. Adults gathered around the patio table. Questions filled the air. Few answers followed. For the first time in years, Diane wasn't controlling the conversation. She was trapped inside it. And the most shocking part wasn't the notice itself. It was the realization spreading across the family. Whatever Diane had been hiding was far bigger than anyone imagined, including the people who had voted against me only 7 days earlier. By Wednesday morning, the panic had spread through the family. The confident messages that once filled the group chat were gone. No jokes. No celebrations. No comments about peace finally returning. Instead, everyone wanted answers. Unfortunately for them, the only person who could provide those answers wasn't talking. Ryan's phone rang constantly. His aunt called twice before breakfast. His cousin called during lunch. His sister sent 6 messages in less than an hour. Every conversation followed the same pattern. "What's going on? Did you know about this? Is it really serious?" Ryan answered honestly. "I don't know everything." Which was true. Neither of us knew exactly how far the investigation would go. We only knew what the evidence suggested. Meanwhile, Diane had apparently entered full damage control mode. According to relatives, she spent most of the day insisting the entire situation was a misunderstanding. Paperwork errors, accounting mistakes, administrative confusion. The explanations changed depending on who was listening. That alone made people nervous. Then something unexpected happened.
My phone rang.
It was Ryan's aunt, the same aunt who had raised her hand during the vote. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Emily," she said nervously. "Yes." A long pause followed. Then she asked the question everyone suddenly seemed desperate to know. "Did you have something to do with this?" I kept my voice calm. The investigation began months before the vote. Another silence. "But you knew." I knew there were concerns. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She wanted me to deny everything, or confirm everything. Instead, I gave her the truth. The investigation existed long before Diane decided to turn me into the family's scapegoat. By evening, more relatives started reaching out. Some sounded worried. Others sounded suspicious. A few sounded afraid. The family narrative was beginning to crack. For years, Diane had convinced everyone that I was the source of conflict. The difficult one. The outsider. The problem. Now they were being forced to consider another possibility. What if I had never been the problem at all? That question spread faster than any rumor Diane had ever started. And once people began asking it, they couldn't stop. Because every answer seemed to lead back to the same uncomfortable conclusion. The person who had spent years accusing others of causing trouble might have been hiding the biggest secret in the family. And deep down, everyone was beginning to realize it. Thursday morning brought the first real crack in Diane's story. Until then, she had managed to keep everyone focused on explanations, mistakes, misunderstandings, paperwork issues. But explanations only worked when nobody looked too closely. Now people were looking. The investigation continued moving forward, and additional documents began surfacing. Former employees were contacted. Financial records were reviewed again. Transaction histories were examined in greater detail. Every new finding created more questions and fewer answers. That afternoon, Ryan received a call from his cousin Mark. Unlike most relatives, Mark worked inside the family business. For years, he had stayed out of family drama. Now his voice sounded shaken. "Something's wrong," he said. "What do you mean?" Ryan asked. "There are invoices nobody can explain." A pause. "People are going through records going back years." When Ryan hung up, he told me everything. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The walls Diane had spent years building were beginning to collapse. By evening, rumors were spreading throughout the family. Not gossip.
Facts.
Verified information. Several former employees had apparently raised concerns long ago. Those concerns were ignored. Certain financial decisions suddenly looked questionable. Certain promotions no longer made sense. Certain business arrangements were receiving uncomfortable scrutiny. The deeper people looked, the worse everything appeared. For the first time, relatives stopped talking about me. Instead, they started talking about Diane. I watched it happen almost in real time. Family members who once defended her became cautious. Others became openly skeptical. Questions replaced loyalty. Doubt replaced certainty. Then Ryan's sister called. Her voice sounded completely different than it had during the vote. "Emily," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something." "Okay. Has Mom been lying to us?" The question hung in the air. Not because I didn't know the answer. Because she already did. People don't ask questions like that unless part of them already understands the truth. "I think everyone needs to follow the facts," I replied carefully. She sighed. "I never thought I'd hear people talking about Mom this way." Neither had I. For years, Diane controlled every room she entered. Every conversation. Every narrative. Now that control was disappearing. And the most painful realization for the family wasn't the investigation itself. It was discovering that the woman who spent years warning everyone about other people's flaws had been hiding her own all along. By the end of the night, Diane was no longer the unquestioned authority in the family. She was the person everyone was questioning. By Friday, the phone calls had changed. Earlier in the week, relatives wanted information. Now they wanted forgiveness. The first apology came from Ryan's sister, Megan. She called just after lunch. When I answered, she sounded nervous. "Emily, do you have a minute?"
Sure.
A long silence followed. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "I was wrong." For a moment, I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I genuinely didn't know what to say. Megan sighed. "I should never have raised my hand during that vote." The memory flashed through my mind instantly. 12 hands in the air. Noah's confused face. The feeling of standing completely alone. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. "I just kept listening to Mom," she admitted. "I never stopped to think about how you felt." Her voice cracked slightly. That surprised me. For years, Megan had always sided with Diane. Now she sounded ashamed. After we hung up, another call arrived. Then another. Then another. Some relatives apologized directly. Others awkwardly tried to explain themselves. A few admitted they had followed Diane simply because disagreeing with her was exhausting. That confession appeared repeatedly. People were afraid of upsetting her. Afraid of becoming her next target. Afraid of being excluded themselves. The realization changed something inside me. For years, I thought everyone disliked me. Now I was discovering that many of them had simply chosen the easier path. Cowardly, perhaps, but different. That evening Noah came home from school carrying a drawing. "Mom," he said excitedly, "my cousin called me." I looked up. "Really?" He nodded. "He said he misses me." The innocence in his voice made my chest tighten. Children repaired relationships much faster than adults. Ryan smiled for the first time all week. Small progress, but progress. Later that night, another message appeared. This one from Megan. I should have stood up for you years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I stared at the screen for several moments. Then I typed a response. Thank you for being honest. That was all. Because apologies mattered. But they didn't erase the past. Trust wasn't rebuilt with a single phone call. It was rebuilt through actions. And while many family members were finally accepting responsibility, one person still wasn't.
Diane.
According to everyone, she remained defiant, still blaming others, still refusing accountability. And that refusal was isolating her more with every passing day. Saturday morning began with an argument. Not between me and Ryan. Between Ryan and his mother. I wasn't there when the call happened, but I heard enough from the kitchen to understand exactly where it was heading. Mom, stop, Ryan said sharply. A pause. Then another.
No.
I'm done pretending this is someone else's fault. His voice echoed through the house. I had never heard him speak to Diane that way before. For years, Ryan had avoided conflict. Whenever Diane criticized me, he changed the subject. Whenever tension appeared, he tried to keep everyone happy. But there comes a point when neutrality becomes a choice. And Ryan had finally reached that point. The call lasted nearly 30 minutes. When it ended, he walked into the kitchen, looking exhausted. I set down my coffee. You okay? He nodded slowly.
No.
Then he sat across from me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked directly at me. I should have defended you years ago. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I wanted an apology. Because I had stopped expecting one. Ryan rubbed his forehead. I kept telling myself things weren't that bad. I said nothing. Then I convinced myself it would get better. His voice grew quieter. And every time Mom crossed a line, I found an excuse. The honesty hurt, but it also mattered. Because for the first time, he wasn't minimizing what happened. He was facing it. What changed? I asked. Ryan leaned back in his chair. The vote. I immediately understood. Seeing 12 relatives reject me had been painful. Watching Noah witness it had been worse. But for Ryan, it had shattered the illusion that everything was manageable. That day showed me who I was becoming, he admitted. And I didn't like it. Later that afternoon, Diane called again. This time Ryan put the conversation on speaker. Her voice was angry, demanding. She wanted loyalty, support, someone to blame. When Ryan refused, the silence on the line felt endless. Then he said something I knew she never expected to hear. Emily is my family. The room became completely still. I should have remembered that a long time ago. After the call ended, Ryan reached for my hand. For the first time in years, I felt like we were standing on the same side. Meanwhile, Diane was losing allies faster than she realized. And every attempt to avoid responsibility was pushing more people away. The following week, reality finally caught up with Diane. For days, she had insisted everything would work itself out. The investigation was exaggerated. The concerns were temporary. The family would eventually come back to her side. But facts have a way of ignoring confidence. And facts were becoming impossible to dismiss. Additional findings continued emerging from the review. More records were examined. More transactions were verified. More questions demanded answers. By Tuesday afternoon, even the people who had defended Diane the longest were struggling to justify what they were seeing. The family business held an emergency leadership meeting. According to Ryan's cousin Mark, the atmosphere was tense from the beginning. Nobody wanted to be there. But everyone knew it was necessary. For years, Diane had been the center of every major decision. Now her authority was being questioned. By the end of the meeting, leadership responsibilities were reassigned pending further review. Diane was effectively removed from control. When Ryan told me, I simply nodded. Not because I was happy, because I wasn't surprised. Actions create consequences. Eventually, those consequences arrive. The family reacted in different ways. Some people were shocked. Others were disappointed. A few admitted they had expected something like this for years. What surprised me most was how quickly Diane's support disappeared. The same relatives who once followed her without question were suddenly keeping their distance. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Excuses appeared everywhere. Without realizing it, Diane was experiencing something she had imposed on others for years: isolation. Meanwhile, she continued searching for someone else to blame. The investigators, former employees, business partners, even me, especially me. According to Megan, my name still came up constantly. But the difference now is simple. Nobody believed her anymore. That was the part Diane couldn't understand. She thought the problem was evidence. It wasn't. The problem was credibility. And credibility takes years to build. Years of honesty. Years of consistency. Years of trust. Once lost, it rarely returns quickly. Throughout all of it, I stayed silent publicly. No interviews. No arguments. No victory laps. I focused on my family, my work, and Noah. The contrast became impossible to ignore. While Diane fought everyone around her, I moved forward. And eventually the family noticed. By the end of the week, Diane no longer controlled the narrative. For the first time in years, the truth did. And truth was proving far more powerful than fear. 2 weeks after the vote, an unexpected message appeared on my phone.
It wasn't from Diane.
It wasn't from Ryan's sister. It wasn't from anyone I expected. The invitation came from Mark. Family dinner next Saturday. We'd really like you to come. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then read it again. For years, invitations had come through Diane. She chose the guest lists. She controlled the events. She decided who belonged. This invitation felt different. Ryan looked over my shoulder. What do you think? I honestly don't know. And I meant it. Part of me wanted nothing to do with another family gathering. The last one had ended with a vote to remove me from their lives. That memory wasn't easy to forget. A few minutes later, another message arrived. Then another. Then another. Several relatives reached out individually. No excuses. No pressure.
Just simple honesty.
We'd like to see you. We owe you better. No matter what you decide, we're sorry. For the first time, the invitations felt genuine. Even so, I hesitated. Ryan squeezed my hand. You don't have to go. I know. And if you never want to attend another gathering again, I'll support that too. The fact that he meant it made the decision harder, not easier. By Saturday afternoon, I finally agreed to attend. Briefly. Just for Noah. The gathering was held at Mark's house, not Diane's. The difference was noticeable immediately. Nobody seemed tense. Nobody appeared afraid of saying the wrong thing. When we arrived, Noah jumped out of the car before it had fully stopped. His cousins rushed toward him. Within seconds, they were laughing and running across the backyard. Children were remarkably good at moving forward. Adults could learn from them. As Ryan and I walked toward the patio, conversations gradually quieted. For a moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Then Megan stepped forward. She hugged me, not awkwardly, not politely,
genuinely.
Others followed. The atmosphere felt unfamiliar, respectful,
calm,
normal, something I had rarely experienced around this family. Throughout the evening, nobody mentioned investigations. Nobody discussed rumors. Nobody defended past behavior. Instead, people simply treated me like I belonged there. As the sun began setting, I looked around the yard. The faces were the same. The family was the same. Yet somehow, everything felt different. For the first time since marrying Ryan, I wasn't attending as someone being tolerated. I was attending as someone being welcomed, and that changed everything. 3 months later, another family dinner took place. This time, nobody needed convincing to attend. The gathering was held at Mark's house again. Children played in the backyard while adults filled the patio around a long wooden table. Laughter drifted through the evening air. And one person was missing. Diane. No dramatic announcement explained her absence. Nobody needed one. Everyone understood. Life had moved forward. The investigation eventually concluded. Leadership at the family business changed permanently. Diane remained responsible for the consequences of her own decisions. For the first time in years, family events no longer revolved around her. As dinner ended, Noah sat beside me eating a slice of chocolate cake. He was happier than I had seen him in months. Ryan smiled across the table. The tension that once followed every gathering was gone. Not completely forgotten,
but gone.
Then Megan raised her glass. Can I say something? The table grew quiet. She looked at me, then at everyone else. I've been thinking about that vote. Instantly, every adult knew exactly which vote she meant. The one nobody was proud of anymore. Megan shook her head. I still can't believe we did that. Several relatives looked down. Others nodded slowly. Mark sighed. We let one person make decisions for all of us. No, Ryan said gently. We made those decisions ourselves. The honesty settled heavily across the table. Nobody argued, because he was right. After a moment, Noah looked up from his cake. His voice was completely innocent. Why did everybody listen if Grandma was wrong? Silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Truthful silence. The kind that appears when a child asks the question nobody else wants to answer. Finally, Ryan's aunt smiled sadly. Because sometimes adults make mistakes too. Noah considered that, then nodded, as if it made perfect sense. The table laughed softly. Megan looked toward me. Emily, after everything that happened, how did you stay so calm? I thought about the question carefully. Then I answered honestly. Because eventually the truth speaks for itself. Nobody interrupted. Revenge would have kept the fight going. Truth ended it. Several heads nodded. The evening continued, but something had changed. Not in me. In them. The people who once raised their hands against me were now taking responsibility for their choices. And that mattered. As the sun disappeared beyond the trees, Noah ran across the yard with his cousins, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. I watched him and smiled. For years, I thought acceptance was something I had to earn. I was wrong. Real family isn't built on fear, control, or loyalty tests. It's built on respect. And sitting there surrounded by people who finally understood that, I realized something important. I hadn't won because Diane lost. I had won because the truth did. And in the end, that was enough.